On a quiet night in Logan, Ohio, as the town settled into routine, the unthinkable happened. Summer Inman, a young mother of three, stepped out of the bank where she worked, expecting nothing more than to toss the trash and meet her boyfriend. But within minutes, her belongings lay scattered on the ground: a phone, keys, a still-playing music player. Witnesses nearby saw her taken, two masked figures pulling her into a car, her desperate screams echoing into the night, only to be stifled by a cloud of pepper spray. What appeared at first to be a routine abduction would unravel into a web of betrayal, a family's chilling secrets, and an unimaginable plan gone terribly wrong. And as the investigation unfolded, each shocking revelation brought new questions, each twist darker than the last. To those around them, the Inman family seemed like a model of unity and devotion. Their lives were centered around faith, and each Sunday, they were a familiar sight at church. Yet, beyond the public facade, hidden dynamics played out within their close family circle. The story of William and Sandra Inman began in 1983 at church. William, then 18, met 16-year-old Sandra. With the blessing of their families, the young couple married and settled in Logan, a quiet community in Ohio. Bill, as he was commonly known, was a man of deep religious faith, balancing his construction job with playing music at the evangelical church near Nelsonville, Ohio. Sandra managed their household, and in 1984 they welcomed their son, William Jr., whom they affectionately called Will. Will grew up, and in 2001, at 17, he met Summer Cook, a 15-year-old girl also at church, a meeting that mirrored his parents' initial encounter. After 3 years of friendship, they married when Summer turned 18 in 2004 and moved in with Will's parents in Logan, Ohio. By 2004, Bill, now 39, had ambitions to become a pastor. He converted his garage into a small gathering space, which eventually attracted neighbors and friends seeking solace and prayer. His unconventional ministry led to skepticism, but his gatherings continued to grow. In 2005, Will and Summer celebrated the arrival of their first child, Alex, though the family faced financial pressures, partly due to Bill's ministry, which wasn't bringing in sufficient income. They decided to move out of Ohio in search of better opportunities. In 2006, the Inmans relocated to Florida, where Bill and Will found work in hotel construction, and the family adapted to their new life. 2 years later, they returned to Ohio, though they had lost their original home in Logan and had to settle in a rental in Vinton's rural areas. The family continued to grow, with the births of Kelly in 2008 and Alana in 2010. As young parents, Will and Summer sometimes took weekend breaks, while Bill and Sandra enjoyed spending time with their grandchildren. That same year, Bill officially became a pastor, establishing the Faith Church and launching Ranch of Mercy, a charitable project aimed at helping those in need. With aspirations to build a home for orphans and widows, Bill introduced a fundraising lottery, offering a grand prize of either a house or $200,000, along with other rewards. Despite high hopes, no shelter was built, and the lottery, set for September 2010, never took place. In June 2010, Summer informed Will of her desire to separate. In a diary entry, she expressed her feelings of exhaustion, yearning for happiness, and frustration with her life's direction. She feared how Will might react, but knew she couldn't continue in her current situation. Following her decision, Summer moved out, taking her children to her parents' home and allowing them to maintain contact with Will and his family. By August, she started a relationship with Adam Peters and found a cleaning job at a bank in Logan. The scheduled raffle for Ranch of Mercy arrived in September, but without any prize house built, and participants saw no refunds or explanations. Meanwhile, financial challenges continued, with the Inmans facing eviction for overdue rent by December. When Summer and Adam attempted to collect her remaining belongings, Will and his family denied them entry, resulting in a confrontation that led Summer to involve the police and file a complaint against Will. Summer described the change in Will's behavior after their marriage. According to her, he became increasingly controlling, restricting her activities, and even limiting her access to personal items like her phone and keys. She disclosed his desire for a large family and his interest in polygamy, which led him to seek connections online. She also shared that her cats had mysteriously vanished, with Will claiming they had run off, a statement he reportedly made with indifference. Will defended his actions, citing his suspicions about her fidelity as a reason for taking her phone and keys. As for the cats, he said he had taken them to a shelter due to their wild behavior. As a result of the escalating tensions between them, Will received a restraining order, barring him from any contact with Summer and placing him under probation. This restriction fueled a bitter custody dispute, with both sides fighting for the well-being of the children. The Inman family filed a report against Adam Peters, whom they perceived as a potential danger to Alex, Kelly, and Alana. However, events soon took a tragic turn for Summer. On March 22, 2011, 25-year-old Summer Inman finished her shift at the bank late that night. She texted Adam to meet up after work, but she never appeared. Concerned, Adam arrived at the bank by 11:30 p.m. and while searching for her, stumbled upon her scattered belongings, her phone, keys, and a music player still playing with her headphones attached. He found her jacket nearby in the grass. Alarmed, Adam immediately contacted Summer's parents, urging them to notify the police. Initially, Summer's parents called the bank, thinking she might still be inside. When no one there had seen her, they reached out to the Logan police, emphasizing how uncharacteristic it was for her to be late without notice. Officers responded to the scene, gathering statements from witnesses who had been there that night. Two women jogging near the bank recalled seeing Summer around 11 p.m. as she took out the trash. Suddenly, a white car pulled up, driven by a blonde woman, while two masked individuals emerged, seizing Summer and forcing her into the back seat. Despite her attempts to escape and her screams, a nearby bystander's effort to help was thwarted when the driver sprayed him with pepper spray. The car sped off, leaving only the joggers to recount the scene. They rushed to the police to report what they had witnessed, but their account was initially met with doubt by law enforcement, who found the story unusually detailed. The Logan police officially declared Summer Inman missing that same night. Her story quickly spread through local media, and soon, hundreds of Logan residents joined the search, determined to find her. However, as days passed, hope of finding Summer alive began to fade. Her parents held on to their last bits of hope, even as the community's efforts intensified. A Facebook photo Summer had shared just before her disappearance portrayed her with Adam and her children, appearing happy. Unbeknownst to many, Will Inman, still connected to Adam on Facebook, had seen the post. Strangely, Will remained connected online with his estranged wife's new partner, a man who had been introduced to the family in early 2010 when the Inmans hired him for household tasks. This was how Adam and Summer had met and eventually fallen for one another. Summer confided in her diary about her emotional conflict, feeling as though she had betrayed her faith but unable to ignore her feelings for Adam. 5 days before her disappearance, the court proceedings for the divorce continued as Will contested the proposed spousal support. He requested a reduction to just $50 a month, given his modest annual income. The Inman family had sought full custody of the children but had been denied, and losing regular contact with their grandchildren devastated Bill and Sandra, who reportedly looked worn and unwell afterward, visibly affected by the loss. During the investigation into Summer's abduction, law enforcement tracked down the Inman family at Bill's mother's house in Jackson County, Ohio. When questioned, Bill, Sandra, and Will claimed they had no involvement in her disappearance. They asserted that, on the night in question, they were on their way to Cleveland to view a property. However, their car broke down after 3 hours, forcing them to wait for repairs and eventually return to Logan the next morning. They insisted that any disputes with Summer had been minor and infrequent, but expressed that the presence of Adam Peters in their lives had introduced strain and was ultimately the reason for the fracture in their once close-knit family. When law enforcement inspected the Inman family's vehicle, they seized a GPS unit that provided crucial insights. The data revealed that on March 22nd, the night of Summer's abduction, the vehicle was in Logan. The GPS had been deactivated around 5:30 p.m. and only reactivated the following morning, again in Logan, contradicting the family's statement about a trip to Cleveland. Cell phone records further confirmed that Bill, Sandra, and Will were all in Logan on March 22nd and 23. Additionally, surveillance footage showed the Inmans cleaning the car's interior at a car wash on the morning of March 23rd with all three present, but Summer nowhere to be seen. The next stop was a Cleveland auto shop where Bill had nearly new tires swapped out for used ones, explaining that he simply didn't like the current set. The vehicle also appeared to have undergone some modifications. These peculiar actions raised investigators' suspicions, leading to the arrests of Bill, Sandra, and Will Inman, who were subsequently brought in for questioning. Before the arrests, Bill reassured his elderly mother that they were innocent, attributing their ordeal to a test from the devil. Despite hours of questioning, the family members each claimed ignorance of Summer's whereabouts. However, the prospect of a potential death sentence eventually broke Sandra's silence. She confessed that they were responsible for abducting Summer on March 22nd, with Bill and Will donning masks. According to Sandra, their intention was simply to frighten Summer, hoping to secure more access to the grandchildren. Yet, things went tragically wrong. Sandra recounted how, after forcing Summer into the car, Will bound her hands, feet, and neck with plastic ties to prevent her escape. But as she struggled, she began to lose consciousness. Will, realizing the severity of the situation, panicked, frantically searching for a knife to free her. "Mom, where's the knife? I can't find it," he reportedly shouted. Despite their desperate attempts, Summer stopped breathing, succumbing to the restraints. Sandra maintained that they never intended for Summer's death. Their goal was to resolve the custody conflict, but the situation spiraled out of control. On March 29th, a week after Summer's disappearance, Sandra revealed the location of her body. Authorities found her remains in a septic tank at Faith Church near Nelsonville, where Bill had helped with construction years prior and where the couple had been married. Police removed a concrete slab to open the tank, immediately seeing Summer's legs. She had been thrown headfirst into the well, still in her work uniform with a shirt bearing the phrase, "I don't have anger issues, I have issues with idiots." Forensic analysis confirmed strangulation as the cause of death, with no additional injuries aside from the marks left by her restraints. Sandra admitted her initial plan was to dispose of the body in a river, but decided the well near the church would better hide the evidence. She expressed deep shame and regret over her actions and the tragic outcome. During the trial, Bill and Will remained silent, showing no acknowledgement of guilt or remorse and avoiding eye contact with Summer's parents. Only Sandra accepted responsibility, stating that the scheme to intimidate Summer was her idea. Tearfully, she addressed Summer's parents, asking for forgiveness and saying she had loved Summer like her own daughter. Her voice, shaking with emotion, conveyed her remorse, as she expressed that if she could, she would undo everything. In 2012, the verdict came down. Bill and Will Inman were sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, while Sandra received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Yet, those close to the family doubted Sandra was the true mastermind. Friends and church members often noted that Bill had always been the dominant figure, and Will was regarded as spoiled and overindulged by his parents. Many speculated that Sandra's confession was a calculated attempt to shield her husband and son from harsher penalties. Today, Summer's children, Alex, Kelly, and Alana, are being raised by her family. Explaining the absence of their parents and grandparents to the children was a challenging and heart-wrenching process, as they gradually learned the truth about their family's tragic history. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime.
Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. Tair Rada's story. Tair Rada was the pride and joy of Shemuel and Alana Rada, inhabitants of the peaceful Katzrin, a short distance from Haifa in Israel. She grew up with her older siblings, Roy and Ohad, who were always watchful and caring towards her. Tair's vivacious spirit, love for the arts, and talent in dance made her stand out. Her friends fondly referred to her as their guiding star. Naturally, Tair's charisma meant she led and others were inclined to follow. Though her beauty and wit sometimes brewed jealousy among other young girls, any rifts were generally short-lived since many of these girls had been friends from childhood. Tair's daily life included attending a local high school, and like many kids in her neighborhood, she preferred walking to school. It was her routine to call her mother upon reaching home, a reassuring habit for the family. However, on the fateful day of December 6, 2006, things took a turn. Skipping her last class to mingle with her friends, Tair was her usual self, blending in and enjoying the camaraderie. Around 1:20 p.m., she got really thirsty, so she went to the school building to get a drink. Some younger students recall seeing her on the floor where the 10th grade classrooms were located. However, at night, when the usual call didn't come that evening, her mother grew anxious. Initially dismissing it as a simple delay or a visit to a friend's house, Worry soon set in when Ta'ir was nowhere to be found. Her family tried calling her many times on her phone, but she didn't pick up. This made them worry and feel very sad. Ilana's motherly instincts screamed that something was wrong. Without a second thought, she mobilized a search party made up of relatives, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers, all rallying to find Ta'ir. Shemuel, in sheer desperation, joined the search, navigating through the cold, dark streets. The level of distress and panic among Ta'ir's family was palpable. Nobody had seen her since she went into the school earlier, so the police were quickly sent to the school to start looking for her. At around 7 p.m., a group mainly comprising the Rada family's close circle ventured into the school. They searched through the dark hallways and rooms until they got to the girls' restroom for 10th graders. There, they found something unsettling. One of the restroom stalls had its door locked. They saw feet inside, but when they called out, there was a spooky silence, and nobody responded. They used a nearby stall to help them look over, and what they saw was beyond belief. Ta'ir was lying there, not alive, and it was clear that something terrible had happened to her. The walls and floor showed signs of something really scary. She had injuries that were proof of a violent attack, and it was clear that her last moments were filled with fear. The shocking discovery deeply shocked the whole community. Shemuel, who was in a lot of pain, couldn't get close to the crime scene because of how horrifying it was. Ta'ir's brother was so upset that he had to be held back. Everyone in the community was really upset and angry. They couldn't understand how something so terrible could happen in a place where children were supposed to be safe. Parents were worried about their kids' safety and talked about whether it was safe to send them back to school. For a while, the school became a place where a crime had happened, and all the normal classes and activities had to stop. People were confused because the police were searching in a wider area instead of concentrating on the school, which is what the locals thought they would do. The police were talking to people to find out where Ta'ir had last been. 2 people who knew her said they saw her go up the school stairs by herself, without anyone following her. Many students reported being in the restroom around the same time frame as Ta'ir, with several pointing out peculiar occurrences. In the span of 40 minutes, an estimated 10 to 12 girls used the restroom. Yet the police chose to interview only a handful. What struck investigators as particularly odd was how amidst this constant traffic, no one seemed to have witnessed or heard the violent act that took Ta'ir's life. Some students noted anomalies, like the presence of an unfamiliar girl with curly hair. One of Ta'ir's friends, who was confident she knew most of the student body, couldn't recall seeing this girl either before or after that day. Although the mystery girl wore a school shirt, she was perceived as a new student. A specific student claimed to have observed 2 sets of feet in the stall where Ta'ir was later found. Ta'ir's recognizable sneakers and another pair of youth-sized all-stars. She, however, dismissed this observation, attributing a foul odor in the restroom as a reason to leave quickly. Another student, after knocking on the stall's door, was informed it was occupied. The police seemed especially interested in discerning the gender of this voice. Even though she repeatedly mentioned it was a female's voice, she felt the officers were unsatisfied with her response. With the whole community offering their help and sympathy, the Reda family was going through a very sad and difficult time, trying to understand that they had lost Ta'ir. Haim Sadovsky, a private investigator, was really moved by Ta'ir's case, especially because his own daughter was the same age as Ta'ir. He got in touch with the Rada family and offered to use his skills to help them. They were thankful and told him everything they could. Ilana mentioned a peculiar observation. When a group of Ta'ir's friends visited to offer condolences, 2 girls seemed to be having a secretive conversation, prompting Ilana to think they might be withholding crucial information. Haim investigated further, finding numerous inconsistencies in their police statements. Interestingly, one of Ta'ir's classmates went to look for her bag in class, but didn't find it strange that Ta'ir wasn't there. Another classmate mentioned that Ta'ir seemed unusually distant during her favorite class, theater, When her teacher asked what was wrong, Tahir's response was really unsettling. "Because I fear death." This made a lot of people wonder if Tahir had a feeling that something bad was going to happen to her. When they looked into it more, Tahir's friends shared a really disturbing story. They talked about an 18-year-old from Tiberias named Avi who seemed to be fixated on Tahir. He kept calling and texting her a lot, and he even made a really scary threat. He said he would harm her if she didn't agree to be in a romantic relationship with him. Avi made Tahir even more anxious by insisting on meeting her, and when she said no, he threatened her with harm again. But upon police investigation, there was no evidence to corroborate any interactions between Tahir and this supposed stalker, Avi. This brought up an important question. Why would Tahir's friends come up with such a story? Could it be a way to distract from something else? Haim Sadovsky, during his investigation, reasoned that the extreme violence inflicted upon Tahir didn't seem characteristic of an adult assailant. An adult wouldn't need to exert such brutality to overpower a young girl. He postulated that the culprits were likely two individuals, roughly Tahir's age and stature. Aside from the two girls who were previously suspected, there was another person Tahir knew who caught their attention. This girl was similar to Tahir in terms of looks and intelligence, but they had a noticeable dislike for each other. Tahir had told her mom about her concerns regarding this person at the beginning of the school year. What's interesting is that this girl left town not long after Tahir's death, and when the authorities asked her about students leaving town, she avoided giving a straight answer. Despite initial suspicions pointing towards Tahir's classmates, the investigation did not yield any DNA, fingerprints, or shoe imprints as evidence. Authorities then shifted their focus to a gardener employed at the school. His presence in the teacher's lounge on the fateful day, combined with his seemingly disoriented demeanor, as noted by the school psychologist, made him a person of interest. But the school's gardener had a strong alibi that made it hard for the police to connect him to the crime. Even though the psychologist's statements seemed believable, the police were stuck with a lot of uncertainties and not enough answers. Then, in a surprising turn of events, the investigation started looking at someone else who looked very much like the school's gardener. This led investigators to believe that the school psychologist could have mistakenly identified the two. Roman Zadorov, a construction worker at the school, found himself under the investigative lens shortly after Tahir's murder. A recent immigrant from Ukraine, Zadorov had relocated to Israel 2 years prior and was earning a living through miscellaneous construction jobs. He had met his wife, Olga, back in Ukraine, and the two were high school sweethearts. His family made the move to Israel, where he was then employed as a handyman for a contractor. Due to visa restrictions, Zadorov wasn't legally allowed to work, so he was compensated in cash. At his wife's urging, Zadorov had initiated the process of acquiring Israeli citizenship during the time of his arrest. He wasn't fluent in Hebrew and mostly communicated in Russian. The police's suspicion was aroused when Zadorov revealed that he had discarded the clothes he wore on the day of Tahir's murder. During the long hours of his interrogation, while denying any involvement in the crime, investigators scoured his residence. They unearthed pornographic content on his computer, which, upon closer inspection, involved young but legally aged women. Further amplifying suspicion was Zadorov's collection of knives, especially given the nature of Tahir's injuries. Zadorov's detention was based on the circumstantial evidence of the knives and the school psychologist's potentially mistaken testimony. Adding to the tension was the media's reporting of unverified information, claims that Zadorov's DNA matched that found at the crime scene. This, however, was not accurate. While DNA samples were indeed sent to the U.S. for testing, the results were pending. The interrogation tactics took a contentious turn. Authorities missiled Zadorov, stating that his DNA was present at the crime scene in an attempt to extract a confession. Although Zadorov initially resisted, he was pressured into thinking the evidence was undeniable. He speculated that perhaps he inadvertently stepped in blood he had noticed in the school's male restroom, thus explaining any potential trace. After this grueling questioning, he was placed in a holding cell, suggesting further developments in the case were imminent. Something surprising happened. Zadorov's cellmate turned out to be working with the police. They promised him a lot of money, and even more if he could get Zadorov to admit to the crime. But Zadorov didn't give in. He kept saying he didn't do it, especially because he had just become a father and didn't want to lose his family. But after more than a week, the informant tried a different approach. He made Zadorov believe that the evidence against him was really strong, and his best chance to get a shorter prison sentence would be to admit to a lesser crime like manslaughter. That way, he might spend less time in jail. Under significant pressure, and with the informant's guidance, Zadorov was led to believe that he might have acted in a fit of uncontrollable rage, a side effect of feeling marginalized as an immigrant in Israel. Zadorov started doubting his own memory, pondering over past incidents where he acted out and later had no recollection of the event. Eventually, he mused, "Maybe I did kill her. If everything points towards me, perhaps I did it." Yet inconsistencies remained. Zadorov recalled working late on the day of Tair's murder and wasn't covered in any blood. His discarded trousers, which had been a point of suspicion, were thrown away due to their uncomfortable fit, not any purported bloodstains. Without Zadorov knowing, his talks in the prison cell were being recorded. Taking advantage of Zadorov's growing uncertainty, the investigators convinced him to act out what happened during a crime at the school, and they recorded everything on video. The authorities thought this was the proof they needed. Later, in a press conference, they said they had caught Tair's killer and suggested that a small argument over cigarettes had made Zadorov react violently. However, Tair's family and friends challenged this narrative. They desired more concrete forensic evidence. They felt in their core that Zadorov wasn't the actual perpetrator. Their skepticism was compounded by the police's claim regarding the cigarette altercation. Tair was known to detest smoking and was unlikely to insult anyone, especially someone older than her. Tair's mother, Ilana Rada, was persistent in her belief that the real killer came from Tair's circle of friends. Over the years, she gathered information, growing increasingly convinced that there were unsettling dynamics within Tair's close group of friends, leading up to her tragic death. Ilana, while digging deeper into the school's culture, found some disturbing information. She thought that a lot of students might be part of a satanic group, and she started thinking that Tair's death could have been a part of a ritual. As the investigation continued, Roman Zadorov's wife got in touch with their legal team. After they did their own investigation, they came to the conclusion that Zadorov was being blamed for something he didn't do and had been manipulated into confessing. Zadorov quickly recanted his confession, yet remained incarcerated awaiting his trial, which commenced on July 2, 2007. The prosecution's narrative took a dramatic turn. They suggested that traumatic childhood experiences from Ukraine were triggered when Zadorov began working at a school, leading to an explosive reaction when provoked by the students. They also misleadingly stated that DNA evidence tied Zadorov to the crime scene, even though the results from the U.S. had not been received. The defense, however, dismantled the prosecution's claims one by one. Despite the crime scene being dense with various pieces of evidence like blood, hair, and footprints, not a single trace linked Zadorov. His residence was scored extensively, even his washing machine, but yielded no ties to the crime. 3 hairs on Tair's body matched 3 different individuals, none being Zadorov. 60 fingerprints found at the site didn't match him either. Moreover, Zadorov's timeline for the day provided him with a reliable alibi. His whereabouts were confirmed by various people at different times, ensuring he was nowhere near the crime scene during the estimated time of Tair's death. The prosecution relied a lot on Zadorov's confession, even though it had many mistakes. When they reenacted the crime, it didn't match up, and it seemed like the police were telling him what to say. They said Zadorov knew things only the real killer would know, but the defense argued that the investigators actually told him all those exclusive details, When Zadorov was asked to show how certain parts of the crime happened, he kept getting it wrong, and the officers had to help him until his answers matched the evidence. Furthermore, the nature of Tair's injuries suggested they were inflicted by a left-handed individual, while Zadorov was right-handed. The multiple inconsistencies in Zadorov's confession raised significant doubts about its authenticity and the integrity of the investigation. Zadorov's confession had a lot of inconsistencies, and the defense team pointed them out clearly. He said he used a knife with a smooth blade, but the forensic evidence showed that the weapon had a serrated edge. To make things more confusing, during the reenactment of the school, Zadorov took the officers to the wrong restroom. The actual crime scene was easy to spot because there was still crime scene tape there, which was a pretty big mistake. Also, when Zadorov showed how he escaped from the restroom cubicle, it didn't match the evidence at the crime scene. He said he jumped over the cubicle door, but the footprints suggested that the killer climbed over the neighboring cubicle instead. Prosecutors argued that a bloody footprint at the scene matched Zadorov's specific shoe brand. However, this claim lost weight given that no blood was found on his actual shoes. Considering the violent nature of the crime, it seemed improbable that he could be present in the cubicle without his shoes being splattered with blood. Despite these glaring inconsistencies and the lack of concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Zadorov was found guilty and handed a life sentence. The court labeled his statements as deceitful, adding charges of obstructing a police investigation. After the trial, Tair's mother initially believed Zadorov was the perpetrator, swayed by his confession and the supposed footprint evidence. Yet, in the ensuing months, her conviction wavered. Ilana Rada soon went public with her distrust in the legal system and voiced suspicions towards students at Tair's school, even suggesting a satanic ritual might be involved. Refusing to accept the verdict, Zadorov's defense team remained undeterred in their pursuit of justice. Further muddying the case's credibility was a scandal involving the presiding judge, who later resigned due to charges of indecent offenses against minors. Public sentiment started to shift towards Zadorov, with many voicing their support for his innocence and demanding justice for Tair. In 2016, a documentary, Shadow of Truth, spotlighted the case and introduced a harrowing confession from an anonymous individual. He recounted a chilling admission from his ex-girlfriend, referred to as AK, who confessed to Tair's murder. This former student of the same high school confessed to wearing the school's uniform, lying in wait, and killing Tair in a ritualistic manner. This confession eerily aligned with earlier police testimonies from a student. Ak's backstory further darkened this narrative. She had a traumatic childhood, which included witnessing extreme violence and being concealed in a wolf's corpse for warmth. These experiences led her to have disturbing fantasies about violence and blood, to the point where she became obsessed with them. After Tair's murder, AK supposedly told her lover all the gruesome details of the crime, even showing them her blood-soaked clothes and the murder weapon. She went into great detail about what she did and what happened afterward, and it strangely matched what investigators had already found. Bringing back these unsettling claims and stories only added to the complexity and uncertainty of the case. In the dark aftermath of Tair's murder, AK stayed close to the lifeless body, hiding until it was safe to leave. She managed to slip away without anyone noticing, changing out of her blood-stained clothes and getting clean ones before making her escape. Once she got home, she cleaned herself up and disappeared from everyone's radar. Roman Zadorov's defense team was eager to probe deeper into the account, relayed by AK's ex-boyfriend. They subjected him to 3 lie detector tests, all of which he passed without any signs of deceit. This prompted the police to arrest AK, a striking blonde woman who vehemently denied any involvement in Tair's killing. AK shifted the blame to her former lover, accusing him of both harboring bloody fantasies and physically assaulting her. Things took a really unsettling turn when AK, who was on house arrest, tried to harm her current boyfriend. When he rejected her, an intoxicated AK threatened him with a piece of broken glass. Luckily, People nearby stopped her from carrying out the attack. When the police arrested her, AK suddenly had a scary change of heart and confirmed the horrifying things her ex-boyfriend had told them before. Even though AK was found unfit to go to trial for the attempted murder and was sent to a mental health facility, no formal charges were filed against her. On the other hand, her ex-boyfriend had to deal with charges of obstructing justice and indecent assault while he was in prison. While he was behind bars, the authorities made him a proposition. If he took back what he had said about AK's involvement in Tair's murder, they would drop his charges. He strongly and dramatically refused, even threatening to take his own life, while insisting that AK was responsible for Tair's tragic death. The tragic murder of Tair Rada not only took away a young, promising life, but also shattered the lives of those who loved her. The passing of Shemuel Rada, Tair's father, in January 2016, further added to the family's anguish. During Shemuel's final farewell, Ilana read his heart-wrenching words, calling Shemuel a king soon to be reunited with his queen. Tair underlined the depths of her pain. And amidst her own overwhelming grief, she expressed her own yearning to join them. Yet, the story continued to unfold. The discovery of new forensic evidence in 2018 threw a wrench into the case's perceived conclusions. The matching DNA of a hair found on Tair's body to the man who had earlier made revelations about AK muddied the waters even more. It raised pressing questions. Was he the true perpetrator, or had he been speaking the truth throughout? His proximity to AK during the murder, and the fact that criminals often immerse themselves in investigations added layers of complexity. In 2019, Zadorov's attorney Yoram Halevi filed a request with the Supreme Court for a trial, claiming the existence of a lot of new evidence that proves unequivocally that Zadorov did not murder the deceased and could not have murdered the deceased. In a dramatic ruling in perhaps the most famous murder case in Israeli history, Roman Zadorov was acquitted on March 2023 of the 2006 murder of a 13-year-old schoolgirl that horrified the nation, in a retrial that overturned previous convictions that saw him serve more than a decade behind bars after being sentenced to life. The panel of 3 judges at the Nazareth District Court announced a 2-1 decision to exonerate Zadorov, who burst into tears and later said, "The truth triumphed. I am happy. I was confined to my home. Now I will take my children for a stroll." Judges Asher Kula and Danny Sarfati acquitted Zadorov, while the third judge, Tamer Nissim Shai, ruled that he was guilty. The verdict is some 700 pages long. A representative of the state prosecutors in the case said her team would study the verdict and then decide whether to appeal the acquittal to the Supreme Court. At the end of the verdict reading, Judge Kula turned to Ilana Rada, the victim's mother. "We tried to solve the mystery, but it is possible that Tair took her secret to the grave," he said. Ilana Rada answered, "At last, after 16 years of lies, justice was served. The war is just beginning. This is a cover-up by the prosecution. The prosecutors of the State of Israel murdered my daughter," she added, reiterating her past accusations that the poor investigative work and alleged framing of Zadorov had been tantamount to murdering her daughter all over again. While at the moment no one has been charged for Tair's murder, we hope it will happen in a near future. For more heart-rending tales and true story crimes, remember to subscribe and like. Stay respectful in the comments, especially considering the grieving families. Until next time on Unreal True Crime, stay safe and good night. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, We're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Leah Sousa. On June 7, 1977, the state of Ontario, Canada, witnessed the birth of Leah Sousa. Leah's life began with her strong and determined mother, Laura Sousa, who, despite being a single parent, left no stone unturned in ensuring her daughter's well-being. For a considerable time, their world was just the two of them, journeying through life's highs and lows together. As time unfolded, Laura introduced Leah to her new baby brother, Michael. The identity of their father remains undisclosed to the public. While some believe that a father figure was missing from their lives, the addition of Michael brought a sense of completeness to their family. Living in Cumberland Beach, Ontario, a quaint region about 2 hours away from Toronto, the Sousas had a humble abode with a combined living and kitchen area and a single bedroom. But this didn't deter Leah's spirit. She grew into a radiant young girl with a lively sense of humor and zest for life. Leah's academic achievements and her roles as a doting sister and daughter made her family immensely proud. At the age of 13, the Sousa family decided to visit Laura's sister, taking a rejuvenating 6-week summer break. With the Canadian school year commencing the Tuesday after Labor Day, they were soon back in Cumberland Beach, gearing up for the upcoming academic year. As the 1990 Labor Day weekend approached, Leah was eagerly preparing for her impending high school journey. On the night of September 1, while she rested on the couch, Laura and baby Michael slept peacefully in the bedroom. But that tranquility was shattered when, between 1:30 and 3 o'clock a.m., an unknown individual forcibly entered their home. Initially, the intruder brutally attacked Laura, using a metal object to inflict severe head injuries. He then turned his attention to Leah, assaulting her inside the house before dragging her to the backyard for further violence. The following morning, a friend of Leah's grew concerned after failing to reach her by phone. She decided to check on her, cycling over to the Sousa residence. The horrific sight she discovered was beyond comprehension. Leah's lifeless body lay in the backyard amidst a scene of devastation. The police were immediately alerted, and upon arrival, they found Laura grievously injured but alive. The silver lining amidst the tragedy was that young Michael remained untouched and unaware of the nightmare that had taken place. Laura was rushed to a Toronto-based hospital, where she spent 3 challenging weeks recuperating under tight security, fearing the perpetrator might return. The extent of her injuries required multiple surgeries, leading to the insertion of metal implants in her skull and cheek. One eye was severely damaged, resulting in lasting issues like impaired vision, dizziness, and diminished hearing. The brutal attack on Leah and her mother, who miraculously survived, profoundly shook both law enforcement and the residents of the rural community. In a place where people once led peaceful lives, leaving doors and windows open and letting children cycle freely without any fear, panic began to permeate the air. Parents became hesitant to let their children play outdoors, preferring to keep them close and in sight. Locking doors, securing windows, and keeping weapons nearby for self-defense became commonplace. In fact, out of sheer fear of a nocturnal assault, many residents started keeping a weapon or tool close to their beds. The palpable fear was evident on the faces of the community members. Investigators tirelessly worked to shed light on the events and identify potential suspects. Even though various samples were collected from the crime scene and inside the home, they couldn't find the assailant's DNA. Neither the weapon used in the crime nor the bloodied clothing the perpetrator wore during the attack was ever found. One key clue emerged: a footprint from a size 9 or 10 Nike tennis shoe made of leather. It was believed that Laura might have seen the attacker, but due to her injuries, she could not recall any events from that night. Investigators theorized that the individual who took Leah's life might have been familiar with the family and their vulnerabilities, noting their secluded living area and the absence of a male figure in the household, a single mother with an infant and a teenage daughter. Furthermore, detectives hypothesized that the attacker knew the region well, possibly being a resident or a frequent visitor, and was aware that the family was alone that particular night. One person of interest identified was Brian Timothy Elson from a nearby town. 4 months after Leah's tragic end, Brian took the life of 17-year-old Sandra Bannister in a place less than 13 kilometers from where the Sousa family lived. While Brian denied any involvement, the police suspected he was in Cumberland Beach on the night of the assault on the Sousa household. However, after questioning, he was released. He was never charged for Leah's murder, but pleaded guilty to manslaughter in Sandra's case, serving only 6 years in prison. After his release, due to concerns about his potential threat, the courts allowed the police to monitor his movements for 3 years, though this led to no further developments. As the authorities persisted in their investigations, Laura grappled with the gaps in her memory. Eager to recall the events of that fateful night, she tried various methods, including hypnosis and the controversial use of sodium pentothal, commonly known as truth serum. However, these attempts were in vain. Later, she turned to a renowned expert in brain science in Ontario. He attempted to stimulate Laura's damaged right brain hemisphere with magnetic fields to retrieve memories. Sadly, this effort also failed. He explained that human memories don't instantly solidify. Experiences take 20 to 30 minutes to permanently store in our brains. Unfortunately, during Laura's attack, this critical window was lost. He compared it to shutting down a computer without saving, suggesting that the memory might be lost forever, a heartbreaking outcome for Laura. In 2008, Ontario Provincial Police launched a billboard campaign along the highway near the Sousa residence, seeking new leads on Leah's case. This initiative yielded some promising testimonials. That same year, an intriguing tip led to an extensive search for the murder weapon on a wooded property in Cumberland Beach. However, the search came up empty, and Leah's case remained unresolved. In 2010, marking the 20th anniversary of the crime, the news program ran a feature on Leah's case. During their investigation, they found out that Brian's grandmother, a person of significant interest in the case due to her association with another similar attack, lived on the same street as the Sousa at the time of the incident. Brian was reportedly staying with her during that period. When a reporter located Brian at his home and questioned him about the assault leading to Leah's death, he denied any involvement. He claimed he was at a party in another town that night, where 60 witnesses could confirm his alibi. Over the decades since the murder, more than 1,500 people have been interviewed by the police. The quest for answers in Leah's tragic case continues. On one occasion, Laura spoke to the media, expressing her growing concerns that the case might never be solved. However, she maintained hope that one day she would come to know what transpired and why. The grieving mother pleaded with the community not to forget her daughter, even though she couldn't remember the events of that fateful night. The haunting memories continued to torment her, and she wasn't the only one scared by the tragic events of the summer night in 1990. Officers who investigated Leah's case, along with the journalists who covered it, acknowledged the horror that continued to grip them. By 2020, an investigator of the Ontario Provincial Police, the last in a series of investigators who had been on the case since Labor Day 1990, described the brutality as off the charts. He stated that both mother and daughter, deep in sleep, stood no chance against the attacker as they were ambushed and severely beaten. At that point, he revealed that the police believed a pipe or an iron wrench might have been the weapon used by the assailant. Yet they held back further investigative details to avoid jeopardizing the case. Regrettably, as the years since Leah's assault and the severe injuries inflicted on her mother Laura passed, the mystery of that night remained unsolved. More than 2 decades after the incident, the police reiterated that there were individuals who had information about the events and could potentially help solve the case. Despite a reward offer of $50,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator, that crucial piece of evidence never materialized. Still, they encouraged anyone who believed they had even the slightest information to come forward. Jim Van Allen, a criminal profiler with the Ontario Provincial Police, had studied around 850 fatal assaults before retiring in 2010. He dedicated significant years of his career trying to understand the motives behind heinous crimes and how to prevent them. When discussing Leah's case, he stated that while all violent deaths are tragic, some, like Leah's, are unforgettable. To Jim, the crime scene, which looked like a dollhouse in a tidy 60 square meter space without a basement, suggested that the attack was personal and intimate. Given that the family had only recently moved in and only locals knew they were home, he surmised that the aggressor was local and likely acted alone. In Jim's analysis, the intruder, equipped with a metal tool to break a window pane, likely had a sinister plan for the night. The level of violence exhibited indicated the act wasn't just a random outburst, but rather a manifestation of deep-seated sadism. Jim hypothesized that the assailant, already predisposed to violence, might have been at a personal breaking point, possibly under the influence and driven by a lifetime of resentments. He pondered if the man had a recent argument or felt particularly humiliated that day, suggesting past humiliations could have acted as a trigger for his rage. The profiler believed that the attacker might have known Laura and been interested in her. However, as a single mother, she would have been out of his league, like many other women. Jim's analysis suggested that while the intruder was likely known in the community, he wasn't particularly well-liked, leading women to instinctively fear him. From Jim's assessment, while criminals typically flee their localities after committing heinous acts, he felt Leah's assailant might have remained nearby. Perhaps he cleaned his stained clothes and discarded the metallic instrument. The attacker's potential financial constraints and limited resources might have dictated this choice. Though not exceptionally astute, the culprit had the cunning to remain silent. In Jim's professional estimation, this person showed no regret for Leah's untimely death and likely felt indifferent about Laura's fortunate survival. But all these speculations and years of persistent investigation couldn't bring them any closer to the elusive perpetrator. In a twist in 2014, Barry Rule, an ex-officer of the Ontario Provincial Police with 3 decades of service, unveiled a book named A Viable Suspect: Multiple Murders and the Limits of a Police Force in Canada's Most Noted Unsolved Mystery. Barry's narrative raised suspicions about a serial criminal, dubbed Larry Talbot in his writings, connecting him to Leah's demise and other similar incidents in southwest Ontario. A personal encounter with this man named Larry in 1971 was recounted by Barry, wherein Larry trespassed and assaulted his fiancée. This attack was thwarted by Barry, who noticed the intruder's method of entry. Breaking a rear window resembled the approach at the Sousa residence. Larry, known as a traveling salesman in southwest Ontario, had his vehicle inspected, revealing a rape kit. Yet, regardless of Barry's insights into recurring patterns, Larry escaped intense scrutiny and passed away without ever being a legally recognized suspect. Even as Barry's book garnered attention, it didn't decisively resolve the cases hinting at Larry's involvement. Commemorating the 25th year of Leah's tragic end in 2015, Laura echoed sentiments of profound sorrow and exasperation, mourning the stolen potential of Leah's life. Investigators, over the years, left no stone unturned, pursuing leads, deploying multimedia investigations, revisiting evidence, and meticulously studying the comprehensive case files, among the most voluminous in police records. With the belief that someone local held the key to unlocking Leah's murder mystery, the police broadcasted a plea for information, spotlighting a $50,000 reward. Leah's mother lamented that even after years, she couldn't recollect the events of that devastating night. The knowledge that clues about the identity of the assailant responsible for Leah's tragic end were locked away in her memory was tormenting. Driving past the house became a somber task for many in the community. Paul Peden spoke about the profound impact this incident had on their lives. Even though he never knew Leah personally, the chilling details of her fate left him and his peers deeply shaken. Parents became overly cautious, restricting their children's outdoor activities. In a time without the rapid information spread of social media, whispers of fear propagated through the community. A new detective took over the case in 2019, and he has been diligently collaborating with experts from similar past cases. The case file, vast and complex, demanded exhaustive scrutiny to uncover any overlooked evidence. Though he didn't divulge specifics on whether they believed a single individual or multiple were involved, he emphasized the continual re-examination of evidence from 1990. Thanks to modern forensic methods, even after over 30 years, the brutal demise of Leah Suso remains an unresolved mystery. The collective efforts of the community and law enforcement have yet to bring the perpetrator to justice. This harrowing case serves as a grim reminder to the community about the imperativeness of vigilance and unity. Authorities, meanwhile, are unwavering in their quest for justice. Leah's memory remains etched in the community, continually underscoring the importance of justice and safety for all. That concludes today's narration. Your support is immensely appreciated. If you resonate with this content, please subscribe and share. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. Until next time. The case of Jessica Gutierrez. Jessica Gutierrez, warmly known as Jessie by her family, was born on December 3, 1981, in the United States. She was the youngest amongst her 3 siblings. The family lived in a modest mobile home located in the rural area of South Carolina. In 1983, the tranquility was disrupted when Jessica's parents divorced. The children were left in the full custody of their mother, Deborah, while David Gutierrez, their father, moved to Mexico, maintaining a transient lifestyle between there and California. Following the divorce, Deborah worked diligently, finding employment at the United States Postal Service to meet the needs of her family, ensuring their well-being despite the challenges of raising 4 children alone. In June of 1986, Deborah found herself entangled with a man whose behavior grew progressively controlling and problematic, exacerbated by his increasing alcohol consumption. Eventually, his behavior reached a tipping point, leading to his expulsion from Deborah's life and home. However, Deborah's hope for respite was short-lived as her life plunged into further darkness. On June 5, 1986, a seemingly typical early summer day unfolded in South Carolina. The weather was pleasant, with temperatures hovering around 30 degrees Celsius, clouds ornamenting the sky. The family spent their day indulging in outdoor activities and nurturing familial bonds. The day concluded with Deborah preparing sandwiches for dinner and painting Jessica's nails before the children were put to bed. Jessica, maintaining her usual habits, requested to sleep in her mother's bed, a request granted by Deborah. However, when her elder brother experienced discomfort and pain later in the night, Deborah allowed him to sleep in her bed, relocating Jessica to the room at the hallway's end beside her sister, Becky. The following morning, Deborah awoke to a scene of subtle chaos, marking the inception of her ordeal. The front door was ajar, the family dog wandering restlessly, and a set of curtains lay on the floor, with the mosquito net appearing to be forcibly removed. Jessica was missing. Her absence was accentuated by Becky's ominous statement attributing her disappearance to a man with a magic hat and beard. A state of panic ensued as Deborah combed through every conceivable hiding spot, hoping to find Jessica playing hide and seek. Her efforts were futile, leading her to frantically search the surroundings of her home, eventually reporting Jessica missing at 9 a.m. The ensuing investigations by the Lexington County Sheriff's Department revealed no signs of a struggle nor any missing items from the house, apart from the papers scattered on the bedroom floor. The conjectures pointed to a potential kidnapper entering through the back window, abducting Jessica without waking her, and exiting through the front door. Search operations extended to the neighboring woods and abandoned structures in the predominantly rural area of Red Bank, especially rural back in 1986. The speculations, searches, and Becky's consistent statement about the man with the magic hat continued to haunt the family, embodying the relentless pursuit of truth and justice in the light of such grim circumstances. They searched many woods and areas with small streams and ponds for Jessica. Searches were made using off-road vehicles across large areas filled with nature. The sheriff's department sent a plane to fly over the area, hoping to find some trace of the girl, but none of the searches were successful. Deborah was taken to the sheriff's department to answer questions about what happened in the last 24 hours. She insisted she didn't know what happened to Jessica, but was sure about who did it. She blamed her ex-boyfriend for taking Jessica, but he said he didn't know where she was. The police also looked into Jessica's father, who was in California at the time. No charges were made against them. On June 7, the FBI and South Carolina law enforcement joined the search. Bulletins were sent nationwide. This was 10 years before the Amber Alert system and way before the internet era, so communication between departments could be slow and cumbersome. The sheriff's department tapped Deborah's phone to monitor all incoming and outgoing calls in case someone called with ransom demands. The police told reporters they believed Jessica was taken from the mobile home and didn't walk away on her own. Weeks into the investigation, the detectives only had one physical clue found at the home. A fresh fingerprint was found on the open window at the back of the house, believed to be the point of entry on June 5. The fingerprint was sent to the FBI, but no matches were found. In September 1986, the sheriff in charge announced they had a suspect but didn't have enough proof to charge him. The suspect had failed a polygraph test, but since those aren't admissible in court, it wasn't enough for an arrest. After this, there were few glimmers of hope in the following years. In 1987, police in Kansas contacted the Lexington County Sheriff's Department, saying they had a girl matching Jessica's description. Deborah flew to Kansas hoping to see her daughter, but it wasn't Jessica. Deborah returned to South Carolina, determined to keep Jessica's case alive. She and the sheriff often disagreed about the case and argued over the investigation. Deborah decided to conduct her own investigation and keep Jessica's case in the public eye. In June 1989, Deborah told the state newspaper she had found fibers in an abandoned car connected to a family friend serving time in North Carolina for assault. This was a major revelation. 2 years earlier, Deborah had received a letter from an inmate in North Carolina claiming his cellmate had confessed to abducting and killing a 4-year-old child in 1986. The cellmate, Thomas McDowell, was a registered sex offender living in Lexington County at the time of Jessica's disappearance and was known to the Gutierrez family. Thomas claimed he had killed Jessica because she recognized him and said he had thrown her body into a landfill. Thomas also said he had a beard and was wearing a tall cowboy hat at the time of the abduction. Thomas' cellmate not only informed Deborah but also contacted the police with this information. This led investigators to extensively interrogate Thomas, who agreed to disclose every detail about the crime to the detectives. However, he demanded immunity in exchange. Of course, it wasn't a deal the state was willing to make, so he remained in prison in North Carolina, and Jessica's case officially went unresolved. Deborah felt frustrated and angry. In 1989, she told the state newspaper that it felt like they had no rights and that the system wasn't working for the victims. She was particularly upset that no charges were brought against Thomas. After all, he had confessed, and his version matched the events of June 5. But there was something even more surprising. Thomas's fingerprints were taken and found to match the fingerprint found on the Gutierrez family house window. In 2007, 21 years after Jessica's disappearance, Deborah publicly criticized the Lexington County Sheriff's Department and accused them of mishandling her daughter's case. She said that for years she had been afraid of what would happen if she dared to contradict the sheriff, a powerful figure in South Carolina. But after 2 decades, she wanted the case to move forward and knew she needed media attention to achieve it. Local news had access to a recorded telephone call between Deborah and the sheriff in June 1986, just a few days after Jessica's disappearance. In the call, recorded by the sheriff's department's wiretapping unit, Deborah argued with him about the case, concerned and demanding answers as he was pulling investigators off the search. The sheriff replied that he would give answers when he had them, and then threatened to pull all his agents off the case and send them home if she interfered with him. Of course, Deborah was angered by the sheriff's response, viewing it as a threat to her daughter's case. She asked him what the people who elected him would think if he abandoned Jessica, and he responded that they could elect him or not because he didn't really care what they did. In 2007, when the call transcript was made public, the sheriff said he remembered that Deborah had accused him of favoritism and not handling the case properly, and it had hurt his feelings. Deborah also expressed her frustration with prosecutor, indicating that she had been trying for years to get other agencies to take over the case, but he had not allowed it. The case was even reviewed by the prosecutor in 2007, but no action was taken to charge or prosecute any suspects. When consulted about it, he stated that most of the evidence was inadmissible, and the little that could serve had an explanation and a reasonable doubt. He also said that without a body, the state would need much more evidence to secure a conviction. After this, the case fell back into obscurity, but its main protagonists were generating their own headlines. In 2014, Sheriff James Metz was charged in federal court with 10 counts of bribery and wire fraud, for which he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. In 2016, prosecutor Donnie Myers was arrested for driving under the influence after crashing his car into a utility pole and abandoning the vehicle. He was fined $1,000 and retired from public service in 2017. In 2021, 35 years later, the case sparked renewed interest. Sheriff Jacob, who was elected to office after James went to prison, announced that the county would collaborate with the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team to take a new look at Jessica's disappearance. In January 2022, finally, there was a breakthrough in the case. Police arrested 61-year-old Thomas Eric McDowell in connection with Jessica's disappearance. The subject, whom the child's mother had always suspected, was considered a person of interest in the case but was never followed up on. He resided in Lexington County in 1986. He was arrested at his home and confined to the county detention center. After the arrest, Thomas was charged with murder, kidnapping, and first-degree burglary for the disappearance and death of Jessica Gutierrez. Based on the arrest warrant media outlets have accessed, authorities identified a fingerprint of the suspect at the victim's house. However, it was not disclosed where the fingerprint was found or when it was identified as belonging to Thomas. Regardless, Deborah was aware of the existence of this fingerprint for years, and it was discovered on a window. For her, this was conclusive proof that he committed the crime, as she cleaned her windows every night, and only Jessica's kidnapper would have touched the glass afterward. In the same arrest warrant mentioned, authorities stated that the man was later identified in a photo lineup, and they also had evidence against him that he had told others he had kidnapped and killed the girl. After revisiting the case in 2021, special agents from the FBI and state prosecutors visited the area. Law enforcement agents from South Carolina assisted in interviewing over 125 people. The investigation was extensive, with over 3,500 pages of records reviewed, and 10 FBI field offices were involved in reviewing Jessica's case. The official statement indicated that the arrest was made possible thanks to many years of dedicated investigative work by local, state, and federal partners, as well as the determination of citizens who never forgot Jessica. Jessica's body has never been found, but perhaps this time, the subject will cooperate with authorities about the facts and disclose the location of the little girl. Deborah Gutierrez is still alive, but the long years waiting for answers have taken a toll on her. Her mental health has been affected by her daughter's disappearance, and this time it was Jessica's sister who spoke on her behalf after learning about the suspect's arrest. She said that her family never thought this day would come. She added that her mother fought tirelessly for 36 years for justice for Jessica, praying not only for a conviction, but also for the death penalty. She expressed gratitude on behalf of her family to everyone involved in the arrest of the man whom she described as an evil monster. Paradoxically, Thomas's neighbors considered him a quiet and reserved person who transported his work materials in a van and didn't seem to be a violent individual. Unfortunately, they will have to wait until the trial to find more answers. Apparently, Thomas has not admitted to the crime and has not disclosed what he did to Jessica. And that's the case for today. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. See you in the next episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. On January 24, 2009, in the Spanish city of Seville, a 17-year-old girl named Martha del Castillo left to meet her boyfriend, Miguel Carcanio, as they needed to discuss some aspects of their relationship. After saying goodbye to her family, Martha left her house, never to be seen alive again. After 21 days of search, on February 13, 2009, the police finally located the alleged suspect. The young man assumed all responsibility for the case and revealed that he had gotten rid of Martha and, moreover, all the evidence regarding the case. No one imagined that this would be one of the longest, most erratic, and contradictory cases ever seen in the history of the European country, the case of Martha del Castillo. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Martha del Castillo. Martha del Castillo was born on June 19, 1991, in Seville, Spain, to Eva Casanueva and Antonio del Castillo. She was a 17-year-old adolescent, attending high school, until one day her life took a horrific turn. On January 24, 2009, Martha was chatting with Sylvia Fernandez, her best friend, when suddenly Martha ended the conversation. She told her friend that she had to leave and that she was in a hurry because her boyfriend Miguel Carcanio was waiting downstairs. She needed to talk to him to clarify some things about their relationship and assured that she would tell everything when she returned. In the hallway, Martha ran into her father, who advised her not to get on Miguel's motorcycle. The only response he received from his daughter was a kiss on the cheek. At 5:30 p.m., Martha left her home, and as the hours passed, and she didn't return, her family began to worry. Her mother decided to call all acquaintances who might have information about her daughter's whereabouts, including Carcanio. The unanimous response was that Martha must be with Miguel. He must know where she was. However, after the young man did not answer the calls, Martha's father decided to approach the boy's house, repeatedly rang the bell, but no one opened the door. Eventually, they could contact someone who had seen her that night, Samuel Benitez, a close friend of Miguel. At that moment, Martha's mother perceived the first strange situation. The young man told her that Miguel had left Martha at his house at midnight, which was impossible, as it was only 11:45. At 2 in the morning, Martha's family finally reported her disappearance, but they never suspected that it would become one of the most publicized cases in the country's history. 4 hours later, the details of who was already a suspect, Martha's boyfriend Miguel Carcaño, were provided. At 1:30 p.m., a third report was filed. The police did not take action, and the family became increasingly impatient. Only 17 hours after the first request for help, as established by the protocol, the officers began searching for Martha. In the days following the disappearance, the family decided to take statements from relatives and friends of the young girl. On January 27, 2009, the first press conference was held, while the parents started a campaign to find the young girl. The following day, 2,000 people protested in Seville, calling for the young girl's return, under the slogan, "We are all Martha." On February 7, another demonstration was convened, gathering about 3,000 people. The case echoed on television and in newspapers. After 21 days of searching, on February 13, the police finally located Miguel Carcaño. The 20-year-old assumed all responsibility for the case, stating he had murdered Martha and dumped her body into the Guadalquivir River, very close to his apartment. He also shared a crucial piece of information. He didn't commit the atrocious acts alone. He identified Samuel Benitez as one of his accomplices, claiming he helped dispose of the body. Benitez accepted the blame. Later, Miguel identified Javier Garcia Marin, a problematic miner known as El Cuco, and Francisco Delgado, Carcaño's brother, and his girlfriend, Maria Garcia, as accomplices. All 5 were arrested. The interrogations led to a wave of contradictions, and simultaneously, the meticulous search for Martha's body in the river commenced. On February 16, Carcaño reiterated his statement in front of a judge. Unlike his friend Samuel, who wanted nothing to do with the case, he assured he had not been involved in Martha's murder and only confessed due to police harassment. On March 18, Miguel Carcaño requested to make another statement and changed his version of events, claiming both he and El Cuco abused Martha at knife point, after which the miner strangled her. They then took her body to Delgado's house and later threw it into a garbage container. Following these declarations, the judge ordered the suspension of the search in the Guadalquivir River and directed the search to a landfill. Martha's father even accused Delgado's girlfriend, as her father worked at a biological waste crematorium. He speculated that the body might have been incinerated. This theory gained media traction, but the police continued their search. On November 16, 2009, El Cuco exceeded the maximum term for preventive detention and was transferred to a supervised flat awaiting trial. In February 2011, he was tried again, this time for abuse and murder. However, due to insufficient evidence, he was acquitted of these charges but was sentenced to 2 years and 11 months in a juvenile detention center for covering up for Carcaño. On October 17, 2011, the trial finally commenced against the 4 adult defendants involved in the case. Miguel Carcaño provided more details about Martha's murder, stating he had hit her with an ashtray during a heated argument, causing her death. He revealed his previous statements about abusing her were lies. His brother, his brother's girlfriend, and Benitez claimed innocence and professed ignorance about the location of Martha's body, asserting Carcaño fabricated stories to lessen his guilt. By November 22, 2011, the forensic police confirmed that they had found traces of Martha's blood on Miguel's jacket and a mix of his and Maria Garcia's genetic profiles on a roll of fabric tape. DNA from Francisco Delgado and the aforementioned woman was also found on an extension cable, believed to have been used to strangle Martha. This was unusual as the accused kept insisting that she had only been at the crime scene in the early morning and was unaware of the entire incident. After uncovering the lie, Maria Garcia was accused of desecrating the body and cover-up. The police also detected up to 5 fingerprints on 3 alcohol bottles, one belonging to El Cuco. The only one against whom there was no evidence was Benitez. By this point, the 5 youths were already under the scrutiny of the entire population. The initial trials were held with substantial police presence, and the prosecution assigned prison years for Carcanio, Benitez, Delgado, and Garcia, involving a total of 90 witnesses, including national police officers and experts. The assistance of 30,000 phone monitorings, crime scene photographs, DNA found by the forensic police, and items found at the house located at Leon 13 were considered. The trials had created such a public uproar that people pressed against the police cordon to receive the accused, loudly demanding the appearance of Martha's body. Delgado and his girlfriend appeared covered with balaclavas and sunglasses, but they still couldn't escape the crowd. A lady approached them and started insulting them. Other people tried to remove their glasses while pushing them so that everyone could see their faces. During the trial, El Cuco's mother was interviewed, her face covered. She asserted her son's innocence and claimed neither she nor he knew anything about Martha's body. She was labeled a liar by journalists but didn't care. She still received a sum of 10,000 euros for being interviewed. A few days later, Martha's family asked that her earnings from the program be regulated and that the money be used to face her son's sentence. During the proceedings, a key witness appeared: the taxi driver who transported Delgado on the night of the crime. He stated that he was very attentive to the passengers he picked up, as a colleague had been murdered while working recently. He remembered picking up a bald man with a beard, matching Delgado's description, who had a plastic bag, and looked at him very intently. He took him to Leon 13 Street, precisely where the crime had occurred, and the charge was 8 euros. However, Delgado's defense lawyer questioned this evidence, claiming the fare for the 2 kilometers covered in those years should have been 5 euros, not 8, thus discrediting the statement. When Martha's parents took the stand, they mentioned the profound pain the situation was causing. They had to quit their jobs, start psychiatric medications, and even develop depression. Their other 2 daughters, Martha's sisters, were also going through a horrible time. They just wanted everything to end. To add to the pain, the jury's verdict in January 2012 didn't satisfy the family. Carcanio ended up as the sole responsible party for the young girl's murder and was sentenced to 21 years and 3 months in prison. Additionally, for the next 30 years, he is banned from residing in the city where the victim's parents and sisters live. At the same time, Carcanio should pay part of the trial costs and compensate the victim's parents with 280,000 euros and each of her sisters with 30,000 euros for the moral damage caused by Martha's murder and disappearance. Meanwhile, Delgado, Maria Garcia, and Samuel Benitez were released as there was no evidence placing them at the crime scene at the time of the murder. The following year, Delgado and Benitez demanded Martha's family pay for the trial costs. Martha's father stated he would seek justice beyond national borders as he believed the system in Spain was obsolete. He even claimed he would go to Strasbourg, home to the European Parliament and the European Court of Human Rights. In December 2011, Martha's mother wrote a letter to Carcanio and sent it to prison, asking him to end the torture of uncertainty she felt due to the absence of her daughter's body. She wanted Martha to rest in peace in a place where she could bring her flowers and talk to her. However, the letter never received a response. On January 24, 2012, 3 years after Martha's disappearance, demonstrations occurred in various cities and towns in Spain, demanding justice for the young girl. In prison, Carcanio was threatened by other inmates and later attempted suicide. He was admitted to a therapeutic module and did not receive visitors or talk to anyone on the phone. The young murderer was very busy during his imprisonment, creating up to 7 different versions of the crime, leading to several lawyers resigning from defending him. The latest version, in 2013, implicated someone close to him as the perpetrator of the crime. Carcanio spoke of an argument between him and his brother over the mortgage for the house at Leon 13. He sent a letter to the family expressing his wish to stop covering for Delgado. According to this version, A fight ensued over a fraudulent loan. The conversation escalated to the point that Delgado threatened his brother with a weapon. When Martha tried to intervene, she allegedly received a fatal blow with the butt of Delgado's gun. Delgado then made a call, and Miguel claims he doesn't know who it was directed to or what was discussed, but he remembers that he then ran out of the house, leaving Martha lifeless in the room. It was then that El Cuco arrived, and Miguel asked for his help to dispose of the body using a wheelchair. They transported the body to the Mahaloba farm in La Rinconada and buried it there. Martha's parents believed Carcaño's version and held him in high esteem despite everything that had happened. They requested the reopening of the investigation, focusing on Miguel's brother this time. However, neither the prosecution nor the judge gave weight to the statements. Martha's father decided to visit Carcaño in prison himself, asking him to collaborate. He even told him he had bought the house at Leon 13 and that it would be his after serving his sentence if he helped find his daughter's body. The search for Martha's body was one of the most expensive in the country's history, encompassing both land and sea to locate the young girl. The first search was conducted in the Guadalquivir River. However, several inconsistencies were found when agents tried to recreate the transfer from Leon 13's floor. It was impossible for three people, in this case El Cuco, Carcaño, and Benitez, to transport together on a motorcycle, especially carrying Martha's body. In the reenactment, the body fell to the ground the moment the engine started, when Carcaño claimed that the body had been thrown in a trash bin. The search began in the landfill that receives all the waste from Seville. Due to the time elapse since the young girl's disappearance and the vast amount of waste received by the landfill, the search team estimated they would have to remove around 40,000 tons of garbage to obtain some result. They searched for a total of 32 days without success. The accused mentioned up to 4 different locations where the body was, prompting new searches each time. On one occasion, the then Interior Minister, Alfredo Perez, had to pause the search as the Ministry of Economy and Finance was running out of funds. In April 2013, after pointing to his brother as Martha's real murderer, Carcaño gave a new location for the body near the municipality of La Rinconada. Despite losing almost all credibility after so many false versions, a new search was decided upon. Carcaño accompanied the police officers to where he claimed to have buried Martha's body along with Delgado on that night in 2009. He did not give precise directions. He only sketched the area where he believed they had dumped the body. The soil of 6 farms was excavated, focusing on points where, according to a study done with a georadar, there had been earth movements in recent years. In total, an area of 10,000 square meters was scanned, but again nothing was found. All the searches were in vain. At the request of the parents, the search for the body was halted until 2015. The public ministry asked the defendants to jointly compensate the Ministry of the Interior with a sum of €616,319, the approximate cost of the search, but this never happened. Fortunately, other doubts in the case were resolved, thanks to a very special collaborator. In February 2009, Oscar presented himself to Rosalia, Cuco's mother, as a criminal, but in reality, he was an infiltrator seeking a confession, simple words that could shed some light on Martha's whereabouts. Over time, they began to meet frequently, seeing each other every 2 or 3 days, and talked daily on the phone. Rosalia trusted him with the keys to her house. They shared confidences, took long walks on the beach. He gained her trust and won her over. He even made her believe that they would leave together for some country in Eastern Europe once everything ended for her son. For 2.5 years, Oscar recorded 600 hours of conversation between Rosalia and her surroundings. In October 2011, El Cuco was already granted release permits from the juvenile center to which he had been sent for covering up for Carcaño. During a conversation, Oscar asked the young man if he thought the police were following him, to which El Cuco responded affirmatively, asserting they would do so to find out where they got rid of Martha. This statement forever incriminated him. After finishing talking, El Cuco immediately realized what he had said and quickly rectified, asserting he hadn't done anything, while Oscar played along as if he hadn't noticed. In other tapes, El Cuco mocked the police's efforts to find the body, and Rosalia discussed how inept the investigators had been for not auditing the calls from her mobile phone. Despite the hard work of the man, those 600 hours of recordings were never judicialized. Only in 2022, 13 years after Martha's disappearance, did the infiltrators' work yield results. On May 26, 2022, dozens of people, especially neighbors of Martha's family, gathered at the courthouse doors wanting to accompany them to the celebration of the new judicial process. Rosalia and El Cuco arrived at the courthouse shielded by the police. The young man was entirely covered, wearing a large hoodie, a balaclava, sunglasses, and even gloves. Rosalia was wearing sunglasses, a mask, and a headscarf. In 2011, El Cuco declared that he had not been in the flat on Leon 13th Street, where the crime occurred, but with several friends. He said he had gone home at 11:30 at night and had met his mother's partner, who had gone out to throw out the garbage, then had gone up to his house and had not left for the rest of the night. Rosalia, for her part, said she had gone out with her partner for drinks around 11:30 at night and had returned home around 1:30 in the morning on January 25, finding her son asleep there. El Cuco confessed that on the night of January 24, Carcanio called him after having murdered Martha and asked him for help to bury her body. Along with Benitez, they took his mother's car and went to Leon 13, where Delgado was also found. Meanwhile, Rosalia was at the bar and stayed there until 4:30 in the morning. When she got home, her son was still missing. Both El Cuco and his mother were charged with perjury, the act aggravated by having obstructed the judicial procedure ongoing since 2009. Both El Cuco and Rosalia accepted responsibility for their acts. The trial was held, and the judge suspended all scheduled witness statements, leaving Martha's parents distressed as they had called Carcanio to testify in hopes he would finally reveal their daughter's whereabouts. On June 9, 2022, both El Cuco and Rosalia were sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, and the judge also imposed a fine of €1,440 each and a civil liability payment of €30,000 to Martha's parents. However, they didn't care about the money. They still wanted just one thing: to find the body of their daughter. That same year, the investigative judge authorized the expert to access the mobile phones of Carcanio and Martha. However, he did not grant permission to do the same with the rest of the individuals involved in the case, as there currently is no evidence against them. Carcanio consented to his phone being examined, insisting they would find evidence pointing to his brother as the actual murderer. Yet the main goal was to determine the location of the long-sought body. Although looking for new leads in the criminal case was prohibited, the expert never submitted his findings, and thus, the case was closed indefinitely. In November 2022, 13 years after Martha's murder, the civil court decided to close the separate investigation for the search of the body, deeming the legally stipulated investigation period as expired without any new significant discoveries. Martha's parents came to terms with the fact that Carcanio would never reveal the location of their daughter's body and decided to sell the flat where the crime occurred. Martha's case will join countless other unresolved cases worldwide, with documents gathering dust on a desk. That's all for today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave your comments, always with respect for the family of the victim. This is Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Maria Elizabeth Ridolf was a 7-year-old girl who disappeared from Sycamore, Illinois, on December 3, 1957. Her remains were found almost 5 months later in a wooded area near Woodbine, Illinois, approximately 90 miles from her home. Maria was last seen by her friend on her neighborhood corner of Center Cross Street and Archie Place with an unknown man in his early 20s who called himself Johnny. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Maria Ridulph. Maria Ridulph was born on March 12, 1950, to the marriage of Michael and Frances Ivy Ridulph in Sycamore, Illinois. She was the youngest of their 4 children and had 2 sisters and a brother. While many residents lived or worked on farms in the area, her father Michael worked in one of Sycamore's few factories, and her mother Frances was a homemaker. At the time of her abduction, Maria was 7 years old, 1.10 meters tall, and weighed 24 kilograms, with dark brown hair and brown eyes. She was an honor student, then in the 2nd grade, and had also received awards for perfect attendance at Sunday school at John's Evangelical Lutheran Church. Maria was also described as sensitive and afraid of the dark. Her best friend was 8-year-old Kathy Sigmund, who lived on the same street as the Ridulphs. On the afternoon of December 3, 1957, Maria begged to be let out to play because it had started to snow. After dinner, Maria and her friend and neighbor Kathy Sigmund went out in the growing darkness as the sun had set, near Maria's house. They played a game they called dodging cars, running back and forth trying to avoid the lights of oncoming cars. According to Kathy, after a while, a man approached them, whom Kathy later described to the police as being around 20 years old and tall, with a thin chin, light hair, separated incisors, and wearing a colorful sweater. The man, who said his name was Johnny, asked the girls if they liked dolls and if they liked piggyback rides. He gave Maria a piggyback ride, after which she returned home and came back with one of her dolls to show him. After Maria went back, Kathy ran home to get her mittens, leaving Maria alone with the man. When Kathy returned, Maria and the man were no longer there. Kathy went to the Ridulphs' house to tell them she couldn't find her friend. Initially, the family thought Maria was hiding and sent Maria's 11-year-old brother to look for her. After he couldn't find her, the Ridulphs called the police, and within an hour, both police and armed civilians began a search in the town, but they couldn't locate Maria or Johnny, the man she was last seen with. The FBI, assuming that Maria might have been kidnapped across state lines, a federal crime, arrived in Sycamore within 2 days to assist local and state police in the search. The FBI and police interviewed numerous witnesses who had seen the 2 girls playing without anyone else present between 6:00 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Based on these interviews, it was believed that Johnny had approached the girls after 6:30 p.m., and the FBI concluded that Maria was kidnapped between 6:45 and 7:00 p.m. Maria's disappearance received national media coverage, and both President Eisenhower and FBI Director John Edgar Hoover took an interest in the case. The police continued to investigate various suspects in the area, including passersby, known sex offenders, and a local man who had given children piggyback rides. But they didn't develop any solid leads. Maria's parents appeared on television, radio, and in the press, pleading for the safe return of their daughter and seeking the public's help in finding her. On April 26, 1958, near Woodbine, Illinois, approximately 100 miles from Sycamore, 2 tourists looking for mushrooms in a wooded area along U.S. Route 20 discovered the skeletal remains of a child wearing only an undershirt, shirt, and socks beneath a partially fallen tree. The state of decomposition indicated that the body had been there for several months. The body was identified as Maria Riddle through dental records, a lock of hair, and the clothing she had been wearing when she disappeared. Her coat, corduroy pants, underwear, and shoes were not found. There were no photographs taken at the crime scene, though photographs were taken of the general location without showing the body, because the coroner, James Furlong, did not want pictures of the remains to leak to the newspapers. Due to the crime having occurred within Illinois rather than crossing state lines, the FBI withdrew from the case and left it in the hands of state and local police. The initial autopsy could not determine the cause of death due to the advanced state of decomposition. On December 4th, investigators visited John Tessier's house as part of the search for Maria in the neighborhood. According to Tessier's stepsisters, their mother told the investigators that John Tessier had been home on the night of December 3rd, something they later testified was not true. Shortly thereafter, before Maria's body was found, the FBI investigated Tessier as a possible suspect. Sources differ on whether the investigation was triggered by a comment from a local resident or by John Tessier's parents themselves, trying to divert suspicion from their son when they realized he had the same name and general description as Johnny. Tessier and his parents told FBI investigators that on December 3, 1957, Tessier was in Rockford, Illinois, about 40 miles northwest of Sycamore, to enlist in the Air Force. This story differed from his mother's earlier statement, as reported by her daughters, that Tessier had been at home all night. He said he had been in Chicago on December 2nd and 3rd undergoing the required physical exams for his enlistment. On the morning of December 3rd, he visited the Chicago recruiting office, which was corroborated by records, and then spent the day sightseeing in Chicago before returning to Rockford by train that evening, arriving there at 6:45 p.m. Upon arriving in Rockford, he called his parents to ask them to pick him up and take him home to Sycamore since he had taken the train to and from Chicago and had left his own car at home. Later, telephone records were found showing that a collect call had been made from the Rockford post office to the Tessier home at 6:57 p.m. that evening by someone who gave their name as John Tessier, as written by the operator. After making the call, Tessier met with officials at the Rockford recruiting office to drop off paperwork related to his enlistment. Officers confirmed that they spoke with Tessier around 7:15 p.m. that evening, although one officer also expressed some concerns about Tessier's credibility and behavior. Tessier was taken to the police station to take a lie detector test, which he passed. Based on his alibi and the lie detector test results, Tessier was removed from the list of suspects, and the FBI closed their report on December 10, 1957. In 1997, with no significant leads, Sycamore Police Lieutenant Patrick Soler closed the Riddle case, which was 40 years old at the time, and named William Henry Redmond, a former truck driver and carnival worker from Nebraska who had died in 1992, as the likely man who had abducted and murdered the girl. Redmond had been accused in 1988 of the 1951 murder of an 8-year-old Pennsylvania girl, although that case was dismissed when a police officer refused to reveal the name of a confidential informant. Redmond was also a suspect in the 1951 disappearance of 10-year-old Beverly Potts in Ohio. The case was reopened in 2008 based on new information from McCullough's half-sister, Janet Tessier. According to Janet, her mother, Eileen Tessier, on her death in January 1994, had said, "John did it. John did it. Those 2 girls and the one who disappeared, you have to tell someone." Janet interpreted the statement to mean that her half-brother John Tessier, who would soon change his name to Jack McCullough, had kidnapped and killed Maria Riddle. John, or Jack McCullough, as he was known at that time, allegedly once threatened to kill Janet with a gun and sexually abused his half-sister Jean when she was 14. He was separated from the Tessier family at the time of his mother Eileen's death, and he was told not to attend her funeral. Janet Tessier said that she made several unsuccessful attempts over the next 14 years to get law enforcement, including the Sycamore Police and the FBI, to investigate her mother's statement. State police investigators reviewed the evidence and developed a new timeline in which Tessier could have kidnapped Maria and driven to Rockford in time to make a phone call at 6:57 p.m. and meet with the recruiting officers at 7:15 p.m. Under this new timeline, they determined that Maria would have been kidnapped no later than 6:20 p.m. The police search for Maria had started at 7 p.m. according to Catherine, who said she had returned home from a party at 7 p.m. and found the search had begun. Hoping that Kathy Chapman, formerly Sigmund, would review a series of yearbook photographs, the police took 5 group photos from the Sycamore High School yearbook of 1957. But John Tessier's photo was not in the yearbook because he had been expelled. The police obtained a contemporary photo of him from his ex-girlfriend, which differed from the yearbook photos in that Tessier was wearing a shirt instead of a suit, and the background was dark instead of light. Chapman identified Tessier's photo. Along with the picture, Tessier's former girlfriend at the time of the crime provided an unused military train ticket from Rockford to Chicago dated December 1957. Investigators took this to suggest that, contrary to Tessier's alibi, he did not take the train on his trip to Chicago and instead drove there, which means he could have returned to Sycamore on the afternoon of December 3, kidnapped Maria, and driven to Rockford. In July 2011, the Seattle Police Department, which had joined the Illinois State Police in the investigation, brought McCullough in for questioning. At first, McCullough spoke calmly and cooperated, but when asked about the murder of Maria Ridulph and his whereabouts on the night of the crime, he became evasive and aggressive. After McCullough refused to answer more questions, he was arrested for the kidnapping and murder of Maria Ridulph and extradited to Illinois. Maria's body was exhumed that same month to look for evidence of possible intruder DNA, but none could be found. However, a forensic anthropologist discovered that Maria had been stabbed in the throat at least 3 times with a sharp object. The news of the arrest in a 54-year-old murder case garnered national attention. In the September 2012 trial, the prosecution argued that McCullough was attracted to Maria and decided to kidnap her, but ended up taking her life. They presented new autopsy reports suggesting that Maria had been fatally wounded. 3 inmates who had been incarcerated with McCullough testified that he had talked about killing Maria. However, their stories were inconsistent. One inmate said McCullough talked about strangling Maria with a wire, while another claimed McCullough accidentally suffocated her while trying to prevent her from screaming. The defense argued that the prosecutors and police were pressured by the Ridulph and Tessier families to solve the case and implicate McCullough, even though there was no physical evidence, motive, or indication that McCullough was in the area when Maria was kidnapped. McCullough did not take the stand in his own defense, following his lawyer's advice. On September 14, 2012, McCullough was found guilty of the kidnapping and murder of Maria Ridulph and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. He was 73 years old at the time of the sentencing. In 2015, McCullough, acting pro se, representing himself, filed a post-conviction petition seeking to overturn his murder conviction. After the court initially dismissed McCullough's petition as frivolous and without merit, the public defender who had originally represented McCullough at trial and had continued to investigate the case while staying in contact with McCullough, despite no longer being appointed to represent him, asked the court to reconsider the dismissal. In response to the motions, the county's state prosecutor, Richard Schmack, who had replaced Clay Campbell in that position, conducted a thorough review of the evidence. This led Schmack to conclude that McCullough could not have committed the crime and was, in fact, innocent. According to Schmack, there was no evidence presented at the trial that clearly established McCullough's whereabouts on the night of Maria Ridulph's abduction and supported his alibi. In particular, Illinois Bell telephone records showed that McCullough had made a collect call to his mother that night from a payphone in downtown Rockford, rather than from Sycamore, as alleged in his trial. Given the timing of the phone call, the approximately 40-mile distance between Sycamore and Rockford, and the icy road conditions, Schmack concluded that McCullough could not have been in Sycamore at the time of Maria Ridolph's disappearance. On April 15, 2016, an Illinois Circuit Court judge overturned McCullough's original conviction and sentence and ordered a new trial. McCullough, who still faced charges, was released on bail that day pending the new trial. McCullough was declared innocent of the crime by the DeKalb County Circuit Court on April 12, 2017. And with that, dear listener, we conclude today's case. I look forward to joining you again as we delve into the intricate details of some of history's most dreadful crimes. Until next time on Unreal True Crime, farewell. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Morgan Chantel Nick. Morgan Chantel Nick was born to Morris and Colleen Nick in Ozark, Arkansas, on September 12, 1988. She was the couple's first child, and later, the family expanded with the birth of 2 more children. Morris was known to be a loving and kind father. Those who knew the couple said they embraced their parental responsibilities, doing everything in their power to make life easier for their children. Though Morris and Colleen initially seemed happy, challenges soon surfaced in their relationship. When Morgan was 6, they decided to separate, which ultimately led to a divorce. The process, however, was amicable, and they never fought over the custody of their children. The children primarily lived with Colleen, a devoted mother who always put her children first. Morgan and Colleen shared a close bond, spending most of their time together. Morgan excelled academically, despite her young age. Having just completed kindergarten, her family could already envision her thriving in elementary school. Personality-wise, Morgan was a shy child with a big heart. She loved apples and was fond of cats, leading her mother to allow her to have one as a pet. Despite her shyness, Morgan was actively involved as a Girl Scout and enjoyed playing with other kids. She dreamt of becoming a circus artist or a doctor when she grew up. On June 9, 1995, Colleen received an invitation from a friend to watch a minor league baseball game in Alma, Arkansas. Thinking Morgan might enjoy watching other kids play, she asked her to accompany her to the game, about 30 minutes away from their home. It was a night game, starting at 9 p.m. Upon arriving, the stands were already packed, but Colleen managed to find a spot for herself and Morgan. However, 6-year-old Morgan soon grew bored and began fidgeting with her shoelaces. Despite being a calm child, usually hesitant to engage with strangers. Two older kids approached her. They introduced themselves as Jessica and Ty, aged 8 and 10 respectively. There are different accounts of what happened next. In one version, Morgan asked her mother if she could play with Jessica and Ty, but Colleen initially declined. Concerned about the unfamiliar surroundings and the packed venue of almost 300 people, Colleen was hesitant to let Morgan wander off. However, Colleen's friends urged her to let Morgan play, assuring her she was being overprotective and that Morgan would be fine. Eventually, Colleen relented. The kids mentioned wanting to run up a nearby hill to catch fireflies. With the game nearing its end around 10:30 p.m., Colleen allowed Morgan to go, but only for a short while. In another version, when Jessica and Ty invited Morgan to catch fireflies, Morgan's innate shyness made her decline. Yet Colleen's friends thought it would be good for Morgan to interact with other kids. Colleen then persuaded a reluctant Morgan to go with them, even if it meant leaving her mother's side. What's certain is Morgan left the stands with the two children. While Colleen tried to keep an eye on them, she got distracted when the baseball game ended and teams came into the stands to greet their families. The next time Colleen looked for the children, she saw Jessica and Ty returning without Morgan. Concerned, she immediately asked them about her daughter's whereabouts. They replied that the girl had disappeared while everyone was emptying sand from their shoes, leaning against Colleen's car. Subsequent investigations revealed that while Jessica and Ty sat at the front of the vehicle shaking out their shoes, Morgan was alone at the back emptying hers. Another significant and worrying detail was that the children insisted they saw a creepy man talking to Morgan before she vanished. Confused and anxious, Colleen immediately raised the alarm, and the adults present at the baseball field helped her search the nearby areas for her missing daughter. However, hours passed in the search without results, and Colleen decided to report the incident to the local police. Those who knew Colleen highlighted her kind nature and how she was always willing to help those in need. Therefore, when she needed support in searching for her child, many showed their solidarity. Additionally, being a devoted mother who always looked out for her children made the community even more outraged at the kidnapper or kidnappers who took Morgan away from her family. On the day she disappeared, Morgan was a beautiful girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. Before going to the baseball game with her mother, she had attended her Girl Scouts activities and was wearing the organization's green shirt, blue denim shorts, and white tennis shoes. Another distinguishing feature of the young girl was that she had 5 silver crowns on her molars, a type of cap used to cover and protect a damaged tooth, which were easily visible. When the police were informed of the disappearance, they immediately began their investigation. Officers and local volunteers organized numerous search mobilizations, while detectives went door to door seeking evidence and witnesses. Since Jessica and Ty claimed to have seen a man speaking with Morgan before her disappearance, the police compiled a detailed description of the suspect, who was said to be between 23 and 38 years old with black hair sprinkled with gray, and he had a mustache and beard. Witnesses also reported seeing a faded red pickup truck nearby with a mismatched white camper shell that seemed too small by a couple of inches. They noticed possible damage to the back right corner of the vehicle. Some claimed the truck had Arkansas license plates, but the plate number wasn't recorded. Additionally, upon reviewing home videos recorded at the baseball field, investigators confirmed the existence of the suspect and the aforementioned red truck. However, unfortunately, the recordings were too grainy to provide a clear image of his face. Once Colleen reported Morgan's disappearance, she called her ex-husband and informed him of the situation. Morris seemed devastated by his daughter's disappearance and expressed willingness to cooperate with law enforcement. Surprisingly, during the initial investigation, the girl's father became a potential suspect as some evidence suggested he acted as a low-level drug dealer. He also reportedly had a criminal history, including assault and property damage charges. From the beginning of the investigation, Colleen was willing to cooperate with law enforcement in every way because her only wish was for her daughter to return safely. However, when investigators initially suspected Morris, her ex-husband, of being involved in Morgan's disappearance, she felt the police were making a grave mistake. She defended him, claiming he would never harm their children. Fortunately, the police soon ruled out Morris as a person of interest and focused their attention on Clifford Joe Pullen, rumored to be his drug supplier. This individual had a criminal record, and in addition to being arrested for marijuana possession, he had also been charged with first-degree rape of a minor in 1995, suggesting he might be capable of kidnapping. Nevertheless, authorities quickly cleared Clifford of any suspicion and stated he was not involved in Morgan's disappearance. Although the police received numerous leads at the time, none led to Morgan, and months, and then years went by. During this period, information from Albert Harvey, a resident of Stuttgart, Arkansas, seemed promising. He claimed he had seen a man fitting the suspect's description with a blonde child trying to enter his truck. Interestingly, Albert was able to identify the suspect from the sketch, and the police used all their resources to scour the area. However, as hours went by without any leads, law enforcement began to doubt his claims. They subjected Albert to 2 polygraph tests, which he failed, and he eventually admitted to lying. The case went cold, and as time passed, the search was no longer for a 6-year-old girl, so the existing photos of Morgan seemed insufficient. To provide a solution, in February 2001, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age-progressed photo showing what Morgan might look like at 12 years old. The intention behind such photographs was to widely disseminate an updated image of Morgan. This way, if someone spotted a teenager resembling the image, they could alert authorities to verify if she was the girl abducted in 1995. Leads in the case were dwindling. Although police vowed that they wouldn't stop working the case until they found Morgan, the trail was growing cold. Searches would continue to be held sporadically, and detectives still followed up on every tip they received, but nothing brought them any closer to finding Morgan. The next lead came in January 2002, when a tip led investigators to search a property in Logan County, Arkansas. A witness claimed that Morgan was buried there. This testimony was so detailed and specific that the police acted on it. However, despite using search dogs and scouring the area thoroughly, nothing was found. On August 14, 2005, ABC's Extreme Makeover, Home Edition, and John Walsh, co-founder of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, addressed the topic of missing children, highlighting Morgan's abduction. Colin and Morgan's siblings received a new home after their family home was damaged by a water heater explosion. In November 2010, federal investigators searched a vacant house in Sparrow, Oklahoma, after receiving a tip from a confidential informant. Sparrow was about 25 miles from Alma, and the property they searched had once belonged to a convicted child molester who was currently in jail. Although investigators had nothing linking the man to Morgan's disappearance, they searched through the home looking for possible DNA evidence that might indicate Morgan had been there. Unfortunately, they didn't uncover anything related to the case. In August 2012, 2 convicts, identified as Tonya Smith and James Monhart, were accused of trying to buy some of Morgan's personal documents, including her social security number and birth certificate. While they were found guilty of document forgery, investigations determined they weren't involved in Morgan's disappearance. On December 18, 2017, police conducted another search on a property in Sparrow. Some reports said it was for an unrelated investigation, while others believed it was connected to Morgan's case. Notably, the search dogs signaled to a well on the property, which then became the focus of the search. After an intense 24-hour search, investigators left the property without finding any evidence. In November 2021, detectives identified Billy Jack Links as a potential suspect in Morgan Nick's abduction. An Arkansas resident, Billy was a registered sex offender who had been in and out of prison since 1992. Reports suggest he had a typical upbringing, with no apparent signs of deviance. He served in the U.S. Army during World War and later worked for an airline in Dallas before returning to Arkansas. Despite seemingly staying out of trouble, he was arrested and charged with sexual offenses in 1992. 2 months after Morgan's 1995 disappearance, Billy attempted to kidnap an 11-year-old girl only 8 miles from where Morgan vanished. Witnesses reported he drove a red pickup truck, aligning with descriptions from Morgan's case. A week after Billy's arrest, investigators searched his truck, finding hair, fibers, a mesh sheet, rope, a tarp, insulation tape, and blood on one of the seats. The samples were stored for future analysis, but it's unclear if they were tested then. Shortly after his arrest, Arkansas State Police and the FBI tried to question him about Morgan's case, but he invoked his right to an attorney and refused to talk. Regarding the 11-year-old he tried to kidnap, Billy proclaimed his innocence, but he was convicted of sexual solicitation and sentenced to 6 years in prison in 1995. Billy remained behind bars until his sudden illness and death on August 5, 2000. In 2021, a news channel aired a documentary titled Still Missing Morgan. Arkansas police mentioned they were still seeking information about the red truck with an attached white cabin. The documentary led to over 200 new tips, but none have resolved the case. The revelation about Billy Jack Links was the last major update, but Morgan's disappearance remains an active investigation, with the police continuously receiving tips. Meanwhile, Colleen pleads with law enforcement to follow every lead, refusing to rest until his daughter is found, hoping for her safe return. This case has profoundly impacted Arkansas and even influenced the naming of the Amber Alert. The Amber Alert system began in 1996 after the disappearance of Amber Hagerman in Arlington, Texas. Amber is an acronym for America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response, managed under the Department of Justice. The Morgan Nick Amber Alert is Arkansas's name for the program designed to alert the public when a child goes missing. This program is a joint effort between local law enforcement, media outlets, and civic groups to raise awareness about potential abductions, thereby increasing the chances of locating the missing child. Activating the Morgan Nick Alert involves the participation of all Arkansas law enforcement agencies, along with more than 250 local radio stations, TV networks, and other media outlets. This information is quickly disseminated to all parties, enabling them to broadcast details about a possible abduction widely. As of 2023, the case remains unsolved. Since Morgan's disappearance in 1995, her father, Morris, has opted for privacy, preferring not to discuss his daughter's case publicly. In contrast, Morgan's mother, Colleen, is vocal about her ongoing efforts to bring Morgan home. Colleen lives in Alma, Arkansas, where she runs the Morgan Nick Foundation, assisting families dealing with abductions or missing persons. Beyond advocating for these families, Colleen spreads awareness about daily dangers faced by children and offers detailed resources to help parents and teachers understand online safety basics and parental control apps. Despite extensive investigations that have yielded thousands of leads, there is still no concrete information on Morgan's whereabouts. The FBI and local communities have offered a reward of $60,000 for information leading to the recovery of Morgan Nick and the identification, arrest, and conviction of those responsible for her kidnapping. Thank you for supporting my work. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. See you next time on Unreal True Crime. Goodbye.